think what we're going to see today is 9 policymakers take a step forward collectively, knowing that a judge may find that we acted appropriately or may not, but we're going to do what we see as in the best interest of Montgomery County. In respect to the bill, I strongly feel that our top responsibility is to protect the public, especially kids and vulnerable adults, from unnecessary exposure to pesticides that they cannot avoid themselves. That's very much in line with the role that people appropriately count on government to play. The bulk of scientific studies we know tells us that pesticides cause cancer, nervous system disorders, reproductive dysfunction, immune system problems, as well as many other conditions. Too many of our county's children are needlessly exposed to the chemicals in our neighborhoods, parks, and playgrounds every day. And when our parks and fields and stream areas are sprayed with pesticides, it obviously pollutes our bay tributaries and impacts our bees and birds and butterflies and runs counter to many of the environmental goals we've set, both as a county and a state. We also know we can't wait for the federal government to take action. Their regulatory resources are far too limited, their processes are far too lengthy and complicated, and too often they're far too close to the industries that they're charged with regulating. We've seen that in many other areas, and we've taken action at the state and local level. The federal government has, for decades, neglected the Chesapeake Bay, and we, even though we're not the only contributors to pollution in the watershed, we have passed numerous county and state bills and programs to reduce our burden on the Chesapeake Bay. We are now having 1,000-year floods in South Carolina this very week, but we haven't seen the federal government spring into action to take action on climate change. And particularly in this area of environmental health, the federal government hasn't taken action one area after another. They didn't lead the way to protect us from tobacco exposure. They haven't worked to keep lead out of our toys, or BPA out of our baby bottles, or mercury out of our thermometers and thermostats. In each area, we took state or local action because the federal government hadn't stepped up to protect the public of Montgomery County and Maryland. Even when the feds take action in the face of overwhelming public comment, it often takes far too long and occurs only after immense and lasting damage has been done, as we saw after decades of damage by DDT. We also know at times state and local action helps the federal government to do the right thing, and I'm hopeful that the action we're taking today will help eventually the EPA to find the right path on pesticides. A few years ago, I sponsored successful legislation at the state level to stop industrial agriculture in the state from adding arsenic antibiotics to our agricultural feed. We were the first state to pass that ban, and only after that did the FDA reconsider their approval of that antibiotic, and now that's banned all across the country because Maryland took action. There are numerous other examples I could give you, but I'm hopeful that our actions today will spur the EPA to do their job better as well. I represent many employees of the EPA and the FDA and other agencies who have urged me to take state or local action on numerous issues because they've given up hoping that their agency will take action. I've been influenced by my conversations with them on this and many other issues, and they believe, as I do, that our first concern can't be protecting homeowners' rights to the cosmetic benefits that lawn pesticides promise, especially when there are alternatives. Our first concern, rather, has to be protecting public health and the environment. So that's why I strongly supported the original legislation. I'm very grateful to my committee colleagues who supported my amendment to expand this bill to cover children's playgrounds, both public and private, and I'm glad we removed the sunset provision from the original bill as well. Decades ago, another longtime federal scientist who was deeply concerned about the widespread application of pesticides, like many others I've spoken to in the past year. Her name was Rachel Carson. She was very frustrated that the federal government had not acted on considerable scientific study to protect public health and the environment, just like today. So through her writing and her lectures, she called on the public to become more aware of the dangers of pesticides, and she urged the government to take aggressive action. Well, she lived in my district in Silver Spring. And if she were still with us, I'm confident she would be frustrated by the federal inaction on this issue, but I think she'd be very proud of her Montgomery County Council today. So thank you, colleagues.
Clerk will please call the roll on Bill 5214.
Mr. Elrich?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Elrich votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Berliner?
No.
Mr. Berliner votes no. Mr. Rice?
No.
Mr. Rice votes no. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Katz?
No.
Mr. Katz votes no. Ms. Florine?
Yes.
Ms. Florine votes yes. Mr. Leventhal?
Mr. Leventhal votes yes. Bill 5214 is adopted on a 6-3 vote.